Greetings and welcome to the next sharing of one of our Jataka tales. And this time we are sharing a tale called Military Strategy. And this will be a read along of the story, wherein you get to decide which character you want to read along as. And inside the story, you will find a list of all of the characters. And as they pop up in the story, they pop up in red type, as you see presented here. And our characters for this story, we have the Venerable Danugaha Tissa, and you'll see sometimes when the dialogue is going back and forth pretty quickly, I'll have abbreviated this name with a V. And you'll see also a character of Venerable Mantidatta, represented with an M. You'll see the character of the Buddha, and then you will see the character of Takasukara, who is also referred to as the carpenter boar sometimes, and represented with a T. Then we have the young boars, we have the lieutenants, represented with YB. At times, we have the tiger, the ascetic, the tree deva, and the companion. These are all of the characters in this story known as the military strategy. Also, Takasukara Jataka. That is also the original title of this story. So, the Jataka tales are folk tales that actually predate the Buddha, but they were utilized to also teach valuable lessons that the Buddha also taught during his time. And so you will find that within the story, the different characters, there's always going to be a character that represents an incarnation of the Buddha. So you end up with a story inside a story, whereas there will be a story being told, and then at some point that story then weaves with another story, whereas the Buddha will stop the story and say, "Oh, well, this reminds me of a time when I incarnated as a tree deva," and then the Buddha will begin to tell the story of the tree deva incarnation of himself. So it's a very interesting way of transporting through time these timeless um, uh, imagery, and characterizations and lifelong lessons that the Buddha was teaching. And so what we do here is we read these stories aloud, we read them together as grown folk. It's not just children who get to read aloud and explore and have fun visiting other worlds, but we as adults get to do the same thing. And this is one way that we get to do that as adults, is through the Jataka tales. So I invite you to come along with us now into this particular story called Military Strategy. And wherever you are, please allow yourself to sit comfortably, to relax comfortably, or if you may be reclining, you may be participating in this particular video before going to bed or upon waking up in the morning. It is a practice. However you do it, consider it a meditative practice, consider it a spiritual practice, to think about ethics, to think about good behavior. And one way to do that, to make that real in your life and to make it present in your life, is through stories. And this is one such tale. So let's just get relaxed wherever we are in the world, wherever we are in our homes or where we're living, where we find ourselves. And let's do 3 deep cleansing breaths just to settle ourselves into the story and into the practice. We're going to breathe in deeply through our nose, and then we'll exhale through our mouth. Let's take another breath. And one last breath. Good. Now we are ready to begin. We have come together consciously as one reading community to explore this Jataka Tale. Here we go. It was while staying in Jetavana that the Buddha told this story about 2 elderly bhikkhus. When King Maha Kosala gave his daughter Kosala Devi to King Bimbisar, King Pasenadi, who was Queen Kosala Devi's brother, took back that village. This led to a series of battles between King Ajatasattu and King Pasenadi. After the first battle, which ended in victory for King Ajatasattu, King Pasenadi asked his advisors for strategy to capture his nephew. His advisors mentioned that at Jetavana there were a number of bhikkhus who had been army officers before they ordained. The advisors suggested getting the opinion of some of those bhikkhus. The king was pleased with this idea, but not wanting to ask the bhikkhus directly, he sent several spies to the monastery. The spies stationed themselves outside the leaf hut of Venerable Danugaha Tissa and Venerable Mantadatta on the outskirts of the monastery. At the first light of day, Venerable Danugaha Tissa awoke, started a fire, and asked his companion Mantadatta if he was awake. And yes, I am wide awake. Is there something you wanted to talk about? B. Yes, I was thinking about King Pasenadi. He is a fool. All he knows how to do is eat. What do you mean? He allows himself to be beaten by King Ajatasattu, who is no better than a worm. What do you think he should do? Well, Mantadatta, as you know, there are 3 kinds of strategy to use in a battle. The wagon strategy, the wheel strategy, and the lotus strategy. The king should use the wagon strategy to catch King Ajatasattu. He should hide some valiant men on the tops of hills on both sides with the main force in front. Once King Ajatasattu is engaged in battle with a shout, the men should close in on both sides, and he will be caught like a lobster in a lobster pot. As soon as the spies had heard all of this, they hurried back to tell the king. King Pasenadi immediately set out with a great army. He positioned his forces in the wagon plan exactly as Venerable Danugaha Tissa had suggested and easily captured King Ajatasattu. King Pasenadi held King Ajatasattu prisoner for several days, hoping to teach him a lesson. Then he released the rogue, warning him not to attack Kosala again. Because King Pasenadi was still fond of his nephew, however, in spite of the war, he gave his daughter, Princess Vajira, to the younger king and sent him back to Magadha with great pomp. Later in the Hall of Truth, some bhikkhus were talking about how King Pasenadi had captured King Ajatasattu by following the strategy devised by Venerable Danugaha Tissa. When the Buddha heard what they were discussing, he said, "This is not the first time, bhikkhus, that Venerable Danugaha Tissa has shown himself expert in strategy. At their request, the Buddha told this story of the past. Long, long ago, in a village near the city gate of Varanasi, there was a carpenter who often went into the jungle to cut wood. One day, he found a baby wild boar who had fallen into a pit. The carpenter rescued the young boar, took him home, and reared him as a pet. He called the boar Takasukara, or carpenter boar. Takasukara became the carpenter's assistant. He felled trees with his snout, stretched the carpenter tools in his mouth, and even held the tape when the carpenter needed to measure the length of a board. When he was full grown, Takasukara was a huge, strong, and healthy boar, and the carpenter loved him like his own son. The carpenter began to worry, however, that someone not realizing that Takasukara was tame might hurt him. Sadly, the carpenter decided to return the boar to the jungle far from the village. Finding a site where he thought the boar would be safe and able to find food, the carpenter bade his friend a fond farewell and returned home. Finding himself alone, Takasukara did not feel at all safe. He immediately began hunting for other boars that he could live with. After searching all day, he finally found a large herd of boars. Running into their midst, he announced, "Greetings! How happy I am to join you, my relatives, and to live with you here where there is plenty of food and no enemies to fear." "Friend," one of the young boars replied, "you are certainly welcome to join our herd. We are pleased to have someone as cheerful as you seem to be. However, don't fool yourself. There certainly is one enemy lurking here. He slays even the strongest among us whenever he wants." "Who can this terrible foe be?" Takasukara asked in surprise. The young boar, "It is a mighty beast with black and yellow stripes, teeth as sharp as swords, and claws which can tear your flesh like knives. When he comes, none of us has a chance against him." T says, "What are you saying? We have formidable tusks. We are tough and strong. Surely we can overcome him if we work together. All we need is a good plan." "That's a good idea," the other boars agreed. "Rather than running away, let's all stand our ground together." "Great," Takasukara shouted, delighted that his new companions were ready to fight the tiger. "Let's start planning. First, I need to know this beast's routine. Tell me, at what time does he usually come?" "He always comes early in the morning. This morning he came at dawn and killed one of our friends for breakfast. He's sure to come again tomorrow at the same time," the young boar answered. "All right," Takasukara replied. "All of you should have your breakfast while it is still dark. Then, just before dawn, gather here, and I will tell you what we must do." All the other boars went off in search of food while Takasukara scouted the area to determine how to arrange the herd to the best advantage to ensure their victory. Very early the next morning, the entire herd assembled, and Takasukara explained to them the rudiments of the wagon strategy and the wheel strategy. "In this case, however," he continued, "we must use what is called the lotus strategy." Then he proceeded to arrange them in this battle configuration. In the center, he placed the suckling babies. In a circle around these, he placed the sows, the mothers. The next circle was the old and wise barren sows. These were surrounded by a circle of rambunctious boars who were still youngsters. The next circle was the adolescents, who were just beginning to sprout tusks. The next circle was the full-grown tuskers. The final circle was the fierce old boars. In several places outside these circles, he posted squads of 10 or 20 strong boar warriors. In front of this lotus formation, in the direction from which the tiger would approach, Takasukara had the boars dig a small pit. In front of that, he had them dig another pit in the shape of a winnowing basket. Between the two pits was a narrow strip of land on which he himself would stand to face the tiger. While the others were arranging themselves and digging the pits, Takasukara went around with his stout, tusked lieutenants to supervise the preparations and to encourage them all. When the sun rose, everything was ready. At that time, the tiger emerged from the nearby hermitage of a false ascetic, with whom he often stayed and strolled toward the thicket where the wild boars lived. A boar who had been posted on lookout cried, "Our enemy is sighted, sir." "All right, everyone," Takasukara said calmly. "Don't be afraid. Just watch the tiger, and whatever he does, you do the same." They all looked up and saw the tiger standing on the top of the hill. Standing at the farthest edge of the winnowing basket pit, the tiger stretched, shook himself, and urinated. In unison, all the boars stretched, shook themselves, and urinated. The tiger stared hard at the boars, surprised to see himself mimicked. The boars continued staring intently at the tiger. The tiger gave a great roar. Remaining in formation, the boars all grunted as loud as they could, which in chorus sounded like a great roar. This thoroughly disconcerted the tiger. "What's happened?" he wondered. "They've always run from me when I roared, but now they're standing in formation and facing me down. Some warrior must be training them. I think I had better not go near them today." He turned around and slunk back to the hermitage. "What's this? Have you become a vegetarian?" the ascetic asked mockingly when he saw the tiger returning without a victim. "Have you taken up nonviolence? Perhaps your fangs have forgotten how to bite. There's a herd of wild boars out there, and you come back an empty-handed beggar." "My teeth no longer bite and my strength is gone," the tiger replied in a dejected tone. "Always before, those boars have scurried around, knocking each other over, trying to get away from me. Today, they are standing shoulder to shoulder in sharp, tusked ranks. Somehow, they have found a leader who is teaching them discipline. They are a formidable army. If I were to charge in there, I'm sure I would be hurt. I'm afraid I have lost my taste for pork." "All alone, the hawk hunts birds," the ascetic cried, trying to encourage him. "By himself, Sokka defeated the Asuras. From a herd of beasts like that, a great tiger can take his pick whenever he wants." "You didn't see them," the tiger protested. "No hawk, no tiger, and not even Sokka himself can defeat a huge disciplined army which makes a united stand the way they do." "Numbers are nothing," the ascetic cried, egging him on. "Little fowl and great flocks and conveys fly together and fill the sky. But when the hawk swoops down, he takes anyone he wants and flies away with ease. You're a tiger. You're a king. Don't you know your own strength? One roar and one powerful leap are all you need. When they see you charging, they will flee in all directions. I'm sure of it. Don't worry. Go and see for yourself. You'll see that I'm right. Persuaded by the sham ascetic's confidence in him, the tiger returned to the hilltop. With his cruel, greedy eyes glinting, he bared his fangs and roared fiercely. "The tiger's back, sir," shouted the boar posted on watch. "Don't worry, just stand your ground," Takasukara commanded as he took his stand on the bridge between the two pits. The tiger roared again. The boars again roared his roar. Then, keeping his eyes on the lone Takasukara, the tiger ran at full speed downhill through the winnowing basket and made a great leap up toward his target. Takasukara neatly disappeared into the other pit. Unable to reach the place where Takasukara had been standing, the tiger tumbled back to the bottom of the pit. Takasukara quickly scrambled out of his hiding place and dropped down on the stunned tiger. With his mighty tusks, Takasukara slashed the tiger and gored his chest, piercing him to the heart. He dragged the carcass of the beast to the center of the pit and shouted to the herd, "Here, take the villain. He's all yours." The first boars to reach the body each got a good mouthful, but those who arrived too late could only ask, "What does tiger meat taste like?" Takasukura approached his lieutenants, expecting them to be pleased that their enemy was dead. He was puzzled to find that they still looked worried. "Aren't you satisfied?" he asked. "Sir," they replied somewhat hesitantly, "you have managed the tiger very well, but there is another enemy. He's worse than 10 tigers." "Who might that be?" asked Takasukara. "There's a crafty, phony ascetic, sir, who has always eaten the meat that the tiger took to the hermitage," the lieutenants told him. "All right," Takasukara replied, "our work is not finished. Let's catch him too." Takasukara led a large group of boars, including tuskers, sows, and young ones, toward the hermitage. The ascetic was standing at the door of his hut, watching for the tiger to return. When he saw the troop of boars charging, he shuddered. "Good heavens, they must have killed the tiger, and now they are coming for me." He cried and ran away as fast as he could and climbed up a wild fig tree. "There he is, sir," the boar shouted to Takasukara. "He has climbed that tree." "Which tree?" Takasukara asked as he looked around. "That fig tree, sir," the boars answered. "All right," Takasukara called as he ran with them toward the tree. "We'll get him." He ordered the young boars to dig up the earth around the tree. He told the sows to carry mouthfuls of water from the nearby pond and to dump it around the tree. Soon the tree was standing with all its roots exposed in the middle of a great muddy pool. Takasukara sent all the others away and walked alone toward the tree. He knelt beneath it and, using his tusks as skillfully as an axe, cut through the roots. It wasn't long until the tree came down, but before the false ascetic even touched the ground, the boars caught him and completely devoured his body. The entire herd of boars gathered at that spot and raised an exuberant cry of jubilation. A tree deva, who had been watching since the night before, smiled and declared, "How wonderful to see friends working together for a common cause. These wild boars, once completely vulnerable in the face of their enemies, joined together and defeated both that ferocious tiger and that phony ascetic." Takasukara turned to his lieutenants and asked, "Is there any other enemy endangering the herd?" No, sir, the Boers replied. Now, thanks to you, we are safe. The elders proposed making Takasukara their king, and everyone agreed. They placed Takasukara on the roots of the fig tree and using the rare conch shell of the false ascetic, sprinkled him with water in a coronation ceremony. They chose a young sow to be his consort. This was the origin of seating a king in a chair made of fig wood and anointing him with lustral water from a conch shell with a clockwise spiral. Having concluded his story, the Buddha identified the birth. At that time, Devadatta was the false ascetic, Danugahatissa was Takasukara, and I was the tree deva. And there we have it, the conclusion of our story, military strategy. As always, let's take our cleansing breaths at the end to seal our story, as we did at the beginning to open the story. We're going to breathe in through our nostrils and out through the mouth 3 times. Let's begin. Well, well done. So that was our story for this time, the military strategy. Um, as I said before, you can definitely see this as a practice, as a meditation practice, if you will. We do the deep cleaning breaths in the beginning. We read our story. We do our cleansing breaths at the end to seal our story. And then post meditation, after our meditation, you can walk with everything that you experienced in the story. I invite you to use all of your sense of sight to read the words. Go back into the story after you close out this session. Go back into the story again. Read the words. Use your sense of sight. Use your sense of hearing, listening to any sounds, whatever's going on around you in your environment as you're reading. Use your sense of hearing to bring that into the story. Also, your sense of consciousness, your sense of imagination in the story. Um, Also, to use the words that make you think of sounds, that make you think of smells, that make you think of taste. Um, there was the talk about what does tiger meat even taste like, right? Um, the idea of the tiger eating the meat of the boars, pork. If you've ever tasted pork, you can recollect that. You can bring that to your imagination. What does that taste like? This sense of touch, of feeling. What does it feel like to stand shoulder to shoulder with like-minded folk to overcome an enemy, to overcome an obstacle or an obscuration? What would that feel like? What would those feelings be like in your heart, in your chest? Would you feel a pounding of your heart, of nervousness, of fear, of excitement? Go back into the story and allow yourself to explore all of those channels through different characters in the story. Also, as a narrator, as I was reading the story, you can go back in as the narrator and you can read along with me, read the story along with me and see what that feels like. I had so many thoughts as a narrator running through my head as I was reading the story, even negotiating the names of the characters in the story and what was the culture like at that time when um, when the story was being told. And what does it feel like to be those characters walking with those names, carrying those names, and the duties that they had associated with them? And then the overall morality that's playing out in the story, the ethics that are being explained in the story, the idea of being able to vanquish and overcome troubles and hard times together as a community, as a collective. There's so much power and strength in that, and overcoming the problems that we face. The value of working together to overcome those things, those hard times. So I hope you will find your way back into the story, and whatever it is that you draw from it, I invite you to walk with that in your day-to-day life, and may it bring you benefit. Thank you so much for sitting with us and reading with us and joining us, and I look forward to seeing you again. Well, I won't actually see you again, but I look forward to reading together with you again in the near future. Be well. Peace and blessings.